Do you ever hike with your guns? I started taking my A2 hiking with me last summer and it's been a blast plinking with it off the trail.
Live off deep in the holler. Drive out to one of my backwoods spots to go camping. 3 hours into 5-hour hike before I reached my camping spot. Nice day, fresh air, clear skies, occasional animal noises in the distance. Getting that oneness feel with nature. Hear some rustling up a hill off the path I'm treading. It's a fucking dude, he's stumbling down the hill. He's walking funny, like a puppet on strings walk. Very weird looking. My memory kicks in. There were no other cars parked in the offshoot that leads to the forest trail I'm treading. We are on the edge of fucking nowhere. There's nothing out there for hundreds of miles from the direction he came from. It's just fucking forests. That's when he started to laugh and called out,
"Hello there."
That's when I unholstered my gun. This dude stumbles onto the trail, he has a real jovial demeanor about him. I rack the slide. Gen 1S and WMNP, no safety. He waves as he walks towards me on the trail. I aim at this guy and yell, "That's close enough." The dude is completely unfazed with me pointing a gun at him, he just keeps laughing and waving. Weird ass gait to his walk, almost serpentine swivel to his legs, but his body didn't move right, like puppet strings were moving him. It was uncanny as fuck. I've heard enough stories about things in the woods from /x/ and other places to know how this shit goes down. I will fucking kill you. I am not fucking around. I say this really fast and loud. If there is any semblance of sanity in this creature, I want them to know they will soon be ventilated. Undeterred, he keeps wiggle walking towards me. This is after I pointed a gun at him and threatened to shoot this motherfucker. I can clearly discern his facial features. He looked normal enough. You'd be forgiven for mistaking him for human for sure if it wasn't for that weird ass walk. He was wearing a sweater and jeans. Just a regular dude by any other account. Said dude is less than 10 meters away at this point, and he continues with the laugh and disjointed conversation starters.
"It's nice to meet you."
Internal monologue goes fuck it, and I dump 5 or 6 rounds of .40 into the sky. I pause for a moment because he stops walking after those shots. I think I hit him, he wasn't bleeding though, he didn't scream or wince or nothing. He just stood there. Then he falls. He settles in an awkward position like his joints and bones aren't connected right. It's like someone put human together without knowing how skeletal structure works. Swear to God. Crinkle man, contorted into a mess of shapes on the trail floor, zipped off like a fucking bird and disappears into the underbrush. I hear a rapid pitter-patter of steps that gradually fade into the fucking woods with twigs and branches snapping as Crinkle man gets further away. I noped out of there hard. It was already 2:30 and by 4:30 it's gonna be getting dark in the forest. Or darker than I'd feel comfortable being with Crinkle man out there. On the spot, I dumped my tent, sleeping bag, and everything I was okay just leaving there because I needed to turn a 3-hour hike into 1 hour and 30-minute hike. There was no fucking way I was going to get caught in the forest after dark with fucking Crinkle man wiggle walking up to my ass. Fuck that. With the bare essentials on my person, I double-timed it back the way I came. Luckily it was mostly downhill so I wasn't fighting gravity like when I came up. I took care not to run too fast because if I twisted my ankle or fell and hurt myself I knew I would be well and truly fucked if Crinkle man was creeping around. At 3:45 the sun was already starting not to show through the trees as much. A slight panic had started to get into me but I remained calm and kept with my brisk pace. I got back to my car at fucking 4:20. I looked back into the forest and apparently my eyes had adjusted to it because it was dark as fuck. 20 meters back into it and the shadows just created a cave-like darkness into the nethers of the underbrush. Got in my car and got the fuck out of there. I don't know what that thing was, but it wasn't going to be wearing my skin. I don't know if that thing is still out there, but I don't camp in that neck of the woods now. I'm not going back for my tent or other kit. It's just not worth it for that stretch of woods.
Honestly, a good story, especially believable with your memory of other X stuff, and not being dumb enough to stick around during the night like other bad LARPs.
What stretch of woods? I'd go for that free tent.
If you can go to the edge of the world, here are the coordinates. You'll find a spot to park your car along the way where the road ends, I'm sure. Peek around that spot and you'll see a path into the woods. Follow it and let it take you where it will. If you follow the path, it'll eventually take you to this lake, coordinates mentioned. That was my original destination before Crinkle Man intervened. The path to the lake isn't a beeline, and don't try to turn it into one. The trees will blend together and the forest will swallow you up if you stray from it, so stay the fuck on that path. I didn't try to hide my shit away, so if you don't come across it, there's a good chance someone got to the stash before you. That was about 3 years ago now. If it is still there, the weather might have worn it down a bit, but maybe you can salvage something. The path might branch a bit. If you encounter the 3 ponds, coordinates mentioned, you've gone too far south. Where's the stash? I was in a panic when I ditched it, so I don't recall the exact location. Somewhere around here maybe? I know that doesn't seem that far, but the path winds up and down around hills and shit, and it'll lead all around. Coordinates mentioned. Before I ran into Crinkle Man, I'd say the lake made for a good camping spot, but now, well, good luck, stalker. I didn't think of it as a bad place before I ran into Crinkle Man. Whatever's in that gully can stay there as far as I'm concerned.
Ain't an excuse to fly to PAL this summer. Fuck around and find out anon. Looks like a lot of elevation change. No close airstrips, so I'll have to borrow a 4-wheeler or get dropped off. I see a trail on the north side of the creek valley that gets a little closer to the lake and higher up. You're saying there's another on the south side? Bear to the left on the 4 Zabel portion and park at the end where the hill flattens on the south side of the valley? I see potentially 2 or 3 creeks to cross. Are you still in AK?
Quote, are you still in AK? Not anymore. I have some friends who still live up there, but they're up in Anchorage. You may have to recruit a local guide to get you close. Quote, I see a trail on the north side of the creek/valley that gets a little closer to the lake and higher up. Speaking of guides, a local native, some admix of a mud from old Haida blood, had told me when I was scouting out the location some 5 years ago to be mindful of waterways north of the bridge. I reckon he meant this particularly spot. Coordinates mentioned. Maybe the old guy just liked telling ghost stories, but basically he talked about forest spirits disappearing people who venture off in that location, and that for my safety I should stay on the south side of the ridge and avoid those creeks and waterways to the north if at all possible. I figured he meant there were bears and bull mooses up there, but I never ventured on that side of the ridge, so I never peeked to find out. Quote, you're saying there's another on the south side? Bear to the left on the 4 Zabel portion and park at the end where the hill flattens on the south side of the valley. Something like that. You may have to scout the area for a little while, but you'll come across an opening in the forest. It should go without saying, but animals made that trail, so there's a decent chance you may encounter some when you go down said trail, some friendly, some not. Maybe even a crypto freak like Crinkleman. Whatever happens, be prepared for a fight, and remember, there's nothing else out there once you go down that path but you and the wilderness. Unless you see someone else parked up there, you're the only human in that part of the world. Maybe I wandered too far north at some point and angered the spirits. After Crinkleman, living up there didn't feel the same. I couldn't enjoy the forests like I used to, at least up in AK.
Here's my shitty screen cap for the green text.
2 months and I'll have something to add for this.
Based, if you can remember, post a thread of you going there.
Oh yeah, I'll make a thread for sure. At the least to post some cool LARP pics and maybe some upside down trees.
Not that guy, but please describe what happened after you shot him in more detail. You say he made off like a bird?
I know it doesn't make sense, but that's the best way I can describe it. Maybe the way it moved made me think of a bird. I was pumped full of adrenaline at the time, so maybe my perception was fucky. A few seconds prior, I was under the impression I may have just killed a man. A weirdo for sure, but possibly a man. It was probably more the speed at which it took off from a seemingly prone position that gave me the bird impression. It reminded me of when you frighten a bird that you don't realize is there and you hear that quick whip 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 of its wings and it's gone a second later. That's not the sound it made, but that's the association my brain made with its movement. It didn't fly though, it just moved really fast and disappeared into the brush. The whole encounter of it coming down the hill, me pointing my gun at it, shooting it, and the thing disappearing into the woods didn't last more than a minute total. Probably less. It didn't spend that much time on the ground crumpled up, maybe a few seconds before it darted off. When I shot it, or believed to have shot it, like I said, it didn't react how you would expect it to. It stopped, stood there for a few seconds, and then it crumpled into its crinkle form. No cry, no wince, no shudder, just an unmoving mass. Like someone snipped the strings on a marionette. And then it was gone. Now that I recall. On my hike back to my car, the forest was dead silent. That's because you fired a gun, dumbass. I mean, maybe, but for the whole hour and a half hike back. No birds singing, no bugs chirping, just pure fucking silence in those woods. It was like a completely different forest on the way back to my car. As it got closer to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my vision was slowly being whittled away by the ever-decreasing light slipping in from the setting sun. It wasn't that great before, but at certain points, I couldn't see more than 20 feet around me. Everything beyond that range just melted into a murky blackness of foliage and underbrush. The whole way back, I had a strong desire to just run like hell, but I knew I'd either trip, get lost, or end up winding myself and having to rest. I had no choice but to tread quickly but carefully and make good time back to my car. All I could do was follow the trail. I'd look behind me every so often and expect that thing to be there creeping up on me, but there was never anything back there. That was for the best, I think. I don't know what I would have done if that creeper showed up behind me on my hike back. I think I would have broke nervous and bolted in a panic. Probably would have gone off the trail and got lost in the underbrush. I don't want to think about what might have happened after that.
Not those anons, but did it move on its human hands, elbows, or?
It was too fast for me to tell. I would say its whole form jumped into the bushes. Trying to make sense of how any part of it moved would be pointless, because to me it was just a blur. If anything, I would say, it didn't need its limbs to move. Its limbs moved because it did. Like something trying to LARP as a living creature.
Did it leave any fluids behind? I mean, if it didn't bleed, then WTF, man.
I didn't see it bleed when I shot it. To be fair, I didn't go and investigate where it fell, so if it bled after the fact I wouldn't know. After the shock of the moment passed, I autistically did the math in my head, because I knew I was no longer camping in the forest for the night. How many hours of daylight do I have left and how fast I could move if I shredded extra weight? As soon as I was ready to mobilize, I very hastily started hiking back to my car. I didn't stop to sky gaze or admire trees or none of that shit like when I was hiking earlier on that day. I was 100% dedicated to getting back to my car as quickly and as safely as I could manage.
Quote, I didn't see it bleed when I shot it. Not only is that disturbing on top of everything else, but the fact that 5 rounds of 40 at that range didn't put it down and it could just zip back in the woods is outright fucked. Glad you made it out of there to tell your story. Out of all the cryptids I've read about and seen, footage of yours is unique and frightening in its implications.